Welcome back to the History of Automation podcast and show. My name is Shawn Tierney, and along with my co-hosts Jeremy and Gary, we'd like to ask you before we get into the show if you've been enjoying these episodes and if you think we should continue it in 2026. Now, it's quite a time investment every Sunday to meet with people and to recruit people and to interview them and then to edit and upload it. And so we want to make sure that if we're doing this, that there's an audience out there who wants to hear this every couple of weeks. And so we're asking you to place your votes. You go to givesendgo.com/automation museum, and you can make a donation like $5, $10, or $20 if you'd like to see us continue in 2026. And if we get no votes, that's okay too, right? Maybe the timing isn't right for an automation museum. But if you're enjoying the interviews we're doing with some of the legends in our industry about some of the products, the creation of some of the products that we all use and love on a daily basis, well then please consider going over to givesendgo.com/automation museum and help us raise enough funds to get this nonprofit off the ground. And either way, I want to wish you all good health and happiness. And now let's go ahead and get into this week's episode of The History of Automation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the History of Automation podcast. Shawn Tierney here with my two co-hosts, Jeremy Pollard and Gary Wilkinson. You guys have known them. This is episode 9, if I'm counting correctly. And we're back to talk about IEC, which originally was 1131-3 and was renumbered to IEC 61131-3. And this is the standard that some really smart people came together and developed to try to create standard for PLC programming languages. And it's changed. I just note that 2 years late, the latest version has come out. It's IEC 61131-3 2025. It came out a few months ago. They usually do it every 10 years. This one took 12 years. But in any case, what I want to do is just really start this conversation. We have two gentlemen here who were involved from really the early 90s. And I really want to just go back. And if you're okay with this, Gary, I'd like to ask Jeremy to go first. And Jeremy, you talk about some of those early interactions, and then we'll go to Gary. And Gary, you can tell us about like some of the work you were doing with Tricon 1131, because back in '95 when you guys were putting this all together, you wanted to jump on this standard. And just so the audience knows, we did have a pre-show to this, so we kind of talked about some of this already. So we're a little bit more organized than we were last time. So which we didn't record because the software broke. But in any case, Jeremy, let me throw it to you if you're okay with that, and really talk about some of your first interactions. Who were you working with at the time, and where are the first interactions you had around this thing called IEC 1131, or now 61131-3?
Thank you, Shawn. And to be frank, my memory is a little sketchy, but I did do a survey for Control Engineering magazine with regards to IEC 61131. And it was a relatively easy survey to do because nobody had a clue as to what it was, and nobody had a clue as to where it was going to go. And in conversation with different customers, they were saying, well, it's new. We'll wait 3 to 5 years, see where it is. And, this was 93, 95 in that area. And in the late 90s, I became the managing director of PLC Open for North America. And PLC Open is an organization that promotes the standard, and they call it a standard as opposed to a specification. And what they were trying to do is suggest that there's no standard without certification. So what their initial sort of mindset was to certify pieces of vendor supplied development environments and runtimes to the standard, and how they complied with it and at what level they complied with it. And there was a huge argument between compliance and compatibility. And in 95, I did an IEC 1131 forum that Jack Bernard from Programmable Controls magazine put on. Dick Morley was the moderator. Otto Struger was part of the panel. There were hardware guys, there were software guys, there were small companies, there were big companies. And one of the gentlemen that was part of it was John Cooper. And John was the automation guy, if you will, for basically for Ford North America, or possibly even global. I can't, again, memory being what it was. I've got his bio here, but I just don't want to read it, I guess. And John was instrumental also with Jerry Ed and Clark Balow in the OMAC specifications of the early 90s, open modular automation controllers, which is now OPAS, right? O-PAS.
Okay.
Open Programmable Automation Systems.
Okay.
I think Exxon, I believe, is sort of spearheading that. So everybody's wanting open. Everybody was wanting standard, and everybody wanted the ability to go interoperability, and everybody wanted to have a transfer of knowledge from one system to another. And that was the sort of the blueprint for what IEC 61131 was supposed to be. And we know that even now that is not the case. We're not interoperable. Transfer of knowledge is done through training. And we all know that training is an overhead. You have to do it. But if you don't have to do it, you're not going to do it. So we'll stick with what we know. And to my not surprised, but surprised that it's taken as long as it has to become somewhat of a subject in the conversation of automation. Because in North America, it's Ladder Logic, it's Rockwell, it's Schneider. Siemens has their own editor. Schneider has their own editor. Of course, Rockwell does. CodeSys is making a lot of inroads and headway because they're giving away the development environment. And I have to wonder whether or not if you're getting the best bang for the buck, if you will, because it's free. But part of and this is I know it's kind of backwards, but this is the transcript from 1995, and don't ask why I still have a copy of it, because I can't tell you.
I'm
But
glad
one
you
of
do.
the things oh shoot, where the heck was it? Odo was saying, no, that wasn't him. Shoot, okay, I can't really.
Can I jump in there for a second, Jeremy?
Yes, you can.
Because I think there's the practical side, and then there's the kind of rose-colored glasses side of things, right?
Right.
So very happy that we have a standard for video cables, right?
Mhm.
HDMI, having everything with HDMI is so great, right? It allows multiple manufacturers to interact with each other seamlessly. I love that. USB-C,
Mhm.
my wife still has an older phone that does not use USB-C, and I'm like not trying to tell her to upgrade, but it's
Mhm.
nice that so many of my devices now I take care of my stuff. So I got mini, I get micro, I got USB-C, I got all kinds of devices all over the place. But I can see a future when that older stuff finally stops working, all my
Mhm.
devices will be USB-C, and that will be a great thing. So standards can be so great. But then I look at electric cars. Like this is one thing that people talk about, go electric, go electric. And then I look and none of these cars can exchange batteries.
No.
None of these cars. As a matter of fact, you go in any car maker, and we joked about this before. Like
Mhm.
the directionals are on different sides, the stick shifts,
Mhm.
everything's like, and so there's a point where not in every realm will we get down to like the Android or the iPhone or the Linux, Windows, Mac. I don't think, and this I think it's a good thing to have multiple like car companies competing. They're all competing. They're doing unique things. They're doing interesting things. The downside is you have to be a little competent when you get in different cars because all the buttons are in different places. But I
Right.
think I think automation products, PLCs, HMIs, I think they're going to be more like automobiles, less like operating systems, right? At
Mhm.
least for this foreseeable future. And I think it's a good thing because it they're trying to sell based on what they can come up with, the new great features they come up with.
Hmm.
And so I think, some people say, well, wouldn't it be great if all the PLCs programmed the same? Well, would it? Would it really be? Because some of those smaller companies would probably not have a place in the market. They're innovating in certain industries, which, like custom
Hmm.
HMIs, where the OEMs can put their name right on the HMI. A lot of little small OEMs like that, right? They
Hmm.
like to make it just blend in right with their machine. And so I think, I don't know. I mean, I'd ask you to respond to that and then maybe go back into what you were saying. But I'm kind of thinking that, having a standard is great for an
Hmm.
educator, because then I can say, here's a standard, here's how Siemens
Hmm.
does it different, or how Rockwell does it different.
Hmm.
But I don't ever expect them all to be 100% compliant to a standard, just because I think that would take away some of their own benefits.
I don't disagree, and I believe that, and as Morley always agreed, that a standard stifles innovation.
I
And
can
there's
understand.
something to be said about that, but there's also something to be said that some level of standardization on some platform in some way isn't a bad thing. And you go to Europe and you've got different plugs for your curling irons. It's a real pain. Um,
For my curling
train
irons.
tracks. You've got to have standards to some degree.
Yeah.
And IEC 1131 was called an international standard,
Hmm.
and I totally disagree with that because it's an international specification,
Okay.
because it specifies X, Y, and Z. And if that's all you do, then you are compliant with the spec or with the standard. But as soon as you do something different, then you're no longer compliant, but you could be compatible,
Hmm.
because whatever it is that you're doing, you're delivering with the same data typing and user interface, or that sort of stuff. And Struger said, after conversation,
Can't
it
see
was
him.
not intended to be interoperable or portable from one machine to another.
When you lift it up too high, you completely disappear.
Yes, I do. Disappearing act.
Well,
And
I
the other
like. Good, good.
and
Go.
one other thing to go along with that is what Dennis Wisnowski said. We must limit rather than extend the standard to keep it a standard. So part of the intent of the standard or specification was to allow vendors to extend it, because it's not going to cover everything that a vendor needs or wants to do. So therefore, it's not a standard because you don't have interoperability, and therefore it is a strong specification for certain things. And again, I think that the transferable information that we have today, that everybody thought we were going to be able to take a floppy disk from hardware platform A and move it to hardware platform B verbatim. And everybody thought that. And I was actually in a seminar where the guy from GE held up a floppy, said, "This will work anywhere." It's like, you guys are off your stick.
Yeah. You can't even take the same car seats from one car to another.
I know.
And
So,
I think that's my analogy. Go ahead.
absolutely it is. So, again, from a specification point of view, data typing,
Yeah.
tasks, routines, programs, that sort of infrastructure, as long as you stay within that infrastructure, whatever you have underneath it, you can be compliant with the specification on that part, but the content of the ladder logic or function block below it could be your own flavor,
Mhm.
and therefore you're not compatible in that regard,
Yeah,
and you're not certainly not compliant.
yeah, but I think there's a point that if you're a smaller company, maybe you weren't one of the three companies that were in that competition at
Mhm.
GM in the late 60s. And you're a smaller company and you're writing new code. It's like, well, there's this thing called the standard. If we follow that, then
Mhm.
if people question, well, why does your timer work that way? You can say it's in the standard. Or why does your counter work this way? You say that's the standard. And so I think this is
Mhm.
a good time to bring in Gary, because when
Yeah.
Gary started his second career as when he got into automation at Triconics, he was tasked with educating people on how to program these triple redundant PLCs, for lack of a better word. And Gary, I'd love to hear your story, how you learned about 1131, how you used it, implemented it. Like, just tell us your backstory on this standard.
Well, as usual, I'd like to start with AI, a little sentence about artificial intelligence. And recently, I have another job now. I'm a professor at the College of Business in Long Beach, California. And I showed my students two slides. The first one was this new technology will completely change everything and take a lot of jobs, and everyone has to change. And that slide was dated 1999. It was talking about the internet. And I showed up a second slide, which was yesterday, about artificial intelligence. Same wording, same issues. Fascinating. So I started my morning thusly this morning. I typed into AI, my ChatGPT, did Gary Wilkinson invent the IEC standard? And I wanted to ask the question in that manner because I was looking, see if they're really thinking up there, they're smart as they say they are.
Mm-hmm.
And they came back strongly, no, Gary Wilkinson did not invent the IEC standard. But he was a trader for Triconics, and Triconics was a company that was just standards were everything. The hardware, it was a hardware company, had to be mapped to the standards. Certification was everything to Triconics. And now this was the first piece of software they had, and that's where I came in just at a great time. And so I looked at my slides for IEC, and I just want to read off this one because it's a way that you would approach a problem. And the way you approach a problem is, what harm can you do? Charlie Munger is famous for this. What harm can I do? Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI. And I'm no Jeffrey Hinton, I'm no Charlie Munger. But I wrote down the slide, and this is what I'd like to read. What is the downside to IEC? I wanted to start with that. And what I wrote was, and of course, I had this, my consultants. Number one, what's the downside is change is usually painful. Mm-hmm. You had everything was DOS and RLL, but RL, relay ladder logic. I must forget that myself. So change is very painful. Number two was the high usage. Everybody was using this ladder logic. Number three is what kind of esoteric, but it defines new architectures for the organization and interaction of tasks. That's pretty wordy, actually. The tasks comes out of the IEC standard, but really wasn't implemented. But number four is in particular, because as you said, Shawn, training is overhead. That's more money. So number four, the downside of implementation of IEC was more training initially. You'd have to train programmers. You'd have to train operators and maintenance. That's money. And, why? Let's put that off a year. Let's put that off 2 years, that sort of thing. So starting with the downside, of course, the benefits were many and many. And since Triconics had that kind of that market, we had our initial customer base, and, users had a lot of, the user groups had a lot of input. Yeah, we had to sell it to them. And a lot of those customers are talking Shell and Exxon. They went and said, hey, we like the fact that we can make custom libraries out of this thing and write our own function blocks and stamp on that function block Exxon only. And we found programmers like that. So there's a lot of parts to Exxon. There's a lot of parts to Shell, that sort of thing. Just as you guys discussed with GM and those fascinating stories about Monicom was adopted. And we kind of felt the same way with, IEC. It was really a lot of salesmanship and starting with this and a lot of skeptics, but we knew we had that customer base, and eventually there was some interest, and the customer did have to pay for training. In fact, they never paid for software in the first 10 years of Triconics, and it was a big thing to charge them for this software, but we stamped on the words like compliant, IEC, or in fact, the software is named TriStation 1131. DOS software was TriStation, Windows was 1131. So a lot of salesmanship, and it took years. And those first few years, actually, and Shawn, you'd be interested in this because you're still getting the business. Okay, the first question was, how do we convert our ladder diagrams to function block diagram? And why should we?
Mm-hmm.
And we said, it's up to you. We offer all 3 languages, well, 3 of the 5, function block, which we think you're going to go to, but we're not going to tell you to. You can stick with ladder, but or you can go structured text. So of course we're hoping we did. I want to be very non-salesman like, but we did all these. Here it is in ladder. Okay, here it is in function block, and I think the company's made the decision. Hey, function blocks really superior, in fact, because of the customization and things like that. So that's kind of the start. And in those early years of training, we're doing AND gates, NOR gates, really converting ladder to function block, and that had a lot of interest. And in fact, eventually we came up in the late 1990s with an automated tool to convert ladder to function block, and sold a few of those. But most companies figured out, hey, we're going to hire somebody to make the conversions. And so it really was probably a good 10-year period, before, okay, we know we're going to stay with function block. Having said that, Shawn, Jeremy, how many lines of ladder logic are still out there?
Millions and millions and millions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the people who know both, hey, there's a market there. There's a market.
Yeah.
Shawn, I hope you're getting that business of how do I convert these these languages to this modern function block diagram.
Wow.
So really, really interesting times. And, and we very much did not want, because we had the product sold itself, the hardware sold itself. So they were really Triconics customers later on. So they had to be there, and eventually they wanted to be there. But later on, as the industry changed, we would get third-party vendors, and we would get competitors and things like that. It's very interesting in our business, in the training business. Well, do we let competitors in? Do we let third-party vendors in who are just going to take the TriStation and compete with us? Very interesting business questions. But above all, we really had to keep the integrity of the training program, and that really owe a lot of that to just keeping the integrity and respecting the standard. I still call it the standard, and what it can and what it can't do. And I felt pretty good about that. And just as the industry grew changed from 95 to 2000, dare I say 2025? I almost said 2025. Amazing. So these decisions, I think I'll say near the end of my career, but it was probably late 2008, 2018, 2019, I started having customers from Siemens in my class. Now, Siemens and Schneider Electric are almost the same size, right? They're located pretty much next door to each other. I didn't think I would see that in my lifetime. So, of course, I called up, are we allowed to do that? Yes. Siemens is buying, so the changes were just amazing. And over that time, it was long past we didn't have to sell IEC standard. Hey, they just wanted to learn. And we had to do basic programming classes. We had to do advanced programming classes to keep up, because we had to keep customers coming back to training, but also they got more confidence in the standard. PLC Open was great reference. I don't think I became official board member of PLC Open until I waited until Jeremy left. Probably 2015, 2006.
Yeah.
Jeremy, where's that Triconics guy?
Weren't you one of the first ones that was certified to do IEC-1131 training?
That was
from
really
PLC Open.
To us. It was really, really important to us. Yeah, and absolutely. And thanks for that, Jeremy, that call, because I have that certificate. And I had to call my boss and say, this is really worth it, man. Could you just spare the $500 or $5,000, whatever Jeremy's charging? I really want that.
I had an expense account,
because I stamped on every training course. This is, blessed by PLC Open, which is organization for IEC. Very, very important to me, personally and professionally, but also that's what our company sold, the integrity of that compliance and that certification of PLC Open. Yeah. And when did the PLC Open officially start?
I would say at least 95, because I'm looking at where's Ilco's.
So while you look that up, I just want to come out here and say, we talk about the original 5 languages, right, that
Hmm.
are in the standard. We had ladder logic, we had function block diagram, we had structured text, and today we
Mhm.
still find a lot of even micro PLCs. They support those 3 languages, like the Micro 800 from Rockwell and the S7 1200 from Siemens. But if you wanted to support them all, you would also have to add instruction list, which
Hmm.
Rockwell's never added. And you would
No.
also have to add sequential function charts. And I know,
Right.
guys, I'm using the American terms for these. There are different
Sure.
terms in Europe, but those would be your 5. And then there's more languages than that. I've been continuous function charts and other type of languages that I've seen in other PLCs, but those were the 5
Mhm.
in the original standard. And
Right.
I know I meet a lot of people today who say you really should do everything in structured text. That's what the new kids want. And I was just reading an article from, I don't know if it was control.com or one of those legacy websites, and with a long history of articles. And they were like, that's what they were saying in 2009. Everybody,
Mhm.
the new kids are going to, and I understand that. But here's what I say to that. And I'll ask you guys if I'm off base here, but I think most of us are familiar with the Office suite, right? Whether it's Microsoft Office or Open Office, whatever, right? And now Google has their own suite, right? So I've been using it since it came out, right? So early adopter. You have your word processor, you had your spreadsheet, right? You have your slides or your PowerPoint, right? You have your database, you have all these different apps, right? And I don't, sometimes I'll start off in Microsoft Word and I'll be like, oh, this really is a PowerPoint. Or
Mhm.
sometimes I'll start off in Microsoft Word and I'll be like, no, this would be best as a spreadsheet. And
Mhm.
so when I'm designing a doc on my computer, right, some kind of document on my computer, you know, I have this tool set, this Office suite, right? Again, it doesn't matter what vendor it's from, but it's typically spreadsheets, word processors, et cetera, slides, and whatnot. And they each do something different. Yeah, can I do a spread? I can do a spreadsheet inside Word. It's painful. And yes, I can write a book inside of Excel, but it's painful. That's how I look at these languages. Like
Mhm.
for very discrete things, I think lateral logic is so super efficient. But if I'm doing a loop or some type of process application, I want that in function blocks. I want to see things circling back around. I want to visually see it there, right? And
Mhm.
so when we get to structured text, if I'm doing any type of loop, like not like I'm programming loop, like a do
Mhm.
while or
For
for
next.
next, or you
Yeah.
know, that is where you do it, or as well as any type of text manipulation. Oh, gee whiz, doing text manipulation in ladder, I've done that a lot. Not fun.
No.
That is what that's the kind of macros we're writing in Excel to manipulate our cells and merge them. I want to do that in structured text. And then if you have a very sequential process, SFCs can't be beat. You can watch it step through. It only can do one step at a time, right? And you can watch it step through, and you know exactly where you are. And then of course we have the whole PACML thing adds another piece to that, right? But are you guys? What do you? Am I crazy, or because I hear a lot of people say structured text, do everything in structured text, and I'm like,
Right.
that's like saying do everything in Microsoft Word. And I'll tell you what, slides and spreadsheets, then I would never use Microsoft Word as my or
Mhm.
Word document creator
Mhm.
as my first choice for those applications. What are your thoughts?
Can I go ahead, Gary?
Please.
Thank you. Okay. Um, somewhere in here, I lost my freaking spot. John Cooper. A major consideration for us in deciding whether to adopt IEC 1131.3-3 will be how much it will cost us to use it and to retrain our people. 1995. Same argument can be made for today. And I think with regards to your analogy, Shawn, I totally don't disagree. But there was one other thing that Struger said, which surprised the hell out of me, was the fact that in North America, we have engineering in development and we have electricians for maintenance. True?
Yeah, I think so. I
Effectively.
would say so.
So now, whatever the guy does in development has to be understood and used and have the tools for by an electrician. And I'm not dissing electricians here,
Oh no.
but the educational foundation and platform of a control engineer in development varies from an electrician on the plant floor.
Greatly.
So the development guys tend to stick with ladder because a 50-year-old plant floor electrician being introduced to a program written in structured text is like Chinese to him. So one of the other points that Sturger was making was the fact that in Europe, and I haven't confirmed this even since 95, but internationally in Europe, that people, especially in Germany, the development team are control engineering people. The people on the floor that are managing the systems are engineering people. And then when the engineering people need electrician type people, they bring them in. And I don't know, Gary, if you've had that situation in all of your training and stuff, but structured text is for the computer guys, not for electrical guys. And if you want to have portability with programs, like you want to develop a portable routine, you would have to do it in structured text.
Hey guys, I'm just breaking in here. I hope you're enjoying this week's show. I just wanted to remind you that we're asking you to vote with your wallets. If you want to see us keep giving up our Sundays to do this, we'd be happy to. We love doing it. We get some great people lined up for 2026. But we're going to need you to vote to let us know that you want us to do that. And the way you vote is you go to givesendgo.com/automation museum and you make a $5, $10, or $20 donation. If we can get up to, I think it's like $800 to actually file the paperwork for the nonprofit, we'll try to do it ourselves and save money if that's all we can raise. Then yeah, we'll keep it going in 2026. We actually have some great guests lined up for the show. But we need you to vote. We need you to vote and let us know you want us to continue doing it. And because we love doing it, but we just want to make sure we're spending our time someplace where people think it's valuable. So again, if you want to see the History of Automation podcast and show, continue to go. If you'd like to see the Automation Museum become a reality, please visit givesendgo.com/automation museum and place your vote with a $5, $10, or $20 donation. And we appreciate it. We appreciate it. And again, we'll continue to bring you this show if you think this is something valuable. In any case, I do want to wish you all good health and happiness. And now we'll return to the rest of this week's episode of the History of Automation podcast and show.
It's the only language that would be transferable, and you would have to be fully compliant to the specification. You couldn't add your own stuff in there because then it wouldn't migrate, if you will. So the new guys, and again, this is probably from 20 years ago. Yeah, we want to use structured text, but the guy at 3 o'clock in the morning doesn't understand what the hell it's doing. And so, and it's been my argument on LinkedIn, is that if you want to use structured text, encapsulate it and give him a block, and he's got stuff going in and stuff going out. It's the only thing he needs to worry about. And I'm not sure whether or not that has flown, but I believe that the level, we are slow moving without a doubt. There are systems out there that are 50 years old, and legacy is an issue because there's a lot of people that aren't as old as I am that have no idea what a PLC 5 is, or a Slick 500, or a Micrologix. You do.
I get you covered, guys. I got new courses coming out on those.
But even in 1774, they're still in operation.
Can't help you with that.
I know. So at the end of the day, we've got this moving window of 30 to 40 years of technology and people. And if I am a maintenance supervisor and I'm 55 years old, what do my guys know? They know ladder. You will do it in ladder. End of story. You know, don't throw anything into the mix that's going to upset the apple cart until a 30-year-old maintenance supervisor comes in and says, we're going to learn structured text. But I don't believe there's any benefit to doing something in structured text versus ladder logic, except for portability and, of course, the ease of use of stuff like for next, do while, and all that stuff. But again, you encapsulate that so the guy at 3 o'clock in the morning doesn't have to think his way through that. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to ramble on about that.
Yeah, very good points. And Shawn, my point is very early on with Triconics training, even before IEC, we would have a maintenance course and an engineer's course.
Mhm.
And basically, the maintenance course would be 3 days because it would be more hardware heavy and the program's already written for you, and here's how you maintain it. And the engineering course would, of course, have 2 days of programming. So really, I think that's, and I'm just curious, Shawn, do you have the same thing? Do you have for maintenance courses and engineering courses, even if it's the same product and maybe divide it that way?
You know, that's a great question. And when I first got in the business in '90, we had a lot of, because they would contact me, ask what was available from the factory, and I'd walk them through it. And we had a lot of requests for, we want our guys to go to the maintenance course. We don't want them to go to a programming course. And
Mhm.
if we think about at the time, I think you described it extremely well, Gary. That was kind of like the dichotomy there between the two courses. I thought the programming courses were horrible because they didn't learn anything about the hardware, and they didn't learn things they needed to know about the hardware. It's like,
Mhm.
dude, you need to know this. Like your programming ain't gonna work. You don't know
Right.
you don't know the difference between card A and B. And on the flip side, on the maintenance, one of the problems I had with the maintenance was, well, now the input's burnt out. You need to rewire that input to another input, and now you have to change the program. Well, I
Mhm.
can't change the program. We'll have to call up an engineer. Be 3 weeks. It's like,
Mhm.
really, really
Yeah.
for less than 30 seconds worth of work. So I had some indigestion over that back in the '90s. That doesn't seem to be an issue today. People just want comprehensive training. It's like, we know we need pro
Right.
software and hardware, but I mean, your thoughts, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think today it's less of an issue. Back then, and then we started. Here's a ladder of, if you will, of training. First, you take the maintenance course, which
Yes.
as a P&L, you sorry want this. Yeah, but be professional. There's going to be some overlap. Number one, take the maintenance course. Number two, take the engineering course. Number three, take the programming course, and you graduate.
Yep.
Mhm.
Take 3 weeks of training, and you could really make a case for that.
Mhm.
At the time, and obviously there's overlap in the three courses, but make them such that for example, the programming course is basically a problem solving course. We would put up a P and ID, we put up a diagram, you program it. Who's gonna get the fastest scan time in the class? Things like that. But
Mhm.
gosh darn, it must be much less of an issue now that you can
Mhm.
actually make that um, into one course, right? Yeah, they'll never see the hardware of their lives, and they might be vendors. And at the end of the day, training is a business, and the companies is an overhead to the customer. It's a business to us.
Mhm.
Um, Very interesting. How you have to make those business decisions and how it's changed over the years.
Yep.
Training is actually still pretty stable at Triconics. New people are coming in all the time, that sort of thing. So I don't think training is going away, even though you can find a lot of stuff on the internet.
Well, the Triconics is mission critical. This isn't somebody putting a little, $100 PLC on a very simple process,
Mhm.
which is great. It's great when people do that. It's like, hey, yeah, learn. Electricians get out there and learn. And going back to something Jeremy said, I think there's this, and I'll coin a phrase, spectrum of opportunity to learn
Mhm.
technology in each generation. And so you look at that 50-year-old, his spectrum of opportunity. Now, and I'm in my 50s, later 50s, but there's a spectrum of opportunities there I had as a youngster. There was everybody who went to high school at my school learned computer programming. We had a room of
Mhm.
Apple IIe's. So
Awesome.
everybody who's in their 50s now who went to my school could have learned programming. And that was pretty common back in that Gen X generation. Now, did
Mhm.
everybody in that generation take advantage of that? Was everybody called to that? No. There were people who wanted to do mechanics. There were people who wanted to do construction, carpentry. but it was of that spectrum of availability. And you'll find a lot more 50-year-olds out there. And this is most of my students, right? So most of them are self-funded. Most of them are electricians who have that background. They like understand code, right?
Mhm.
And they didn't want to sit in an office at Meta or Facebook or Google and write code all day. They were hands-on people, but they
Mhm.
love electronics too. You didn't have as much of that in your generation, Jeremy, because there wasn't as much, the market wasn't as big.
Well, the
And
technology
today,
spectrum wasn't that big.
yeah, it was a much less companies in it, less PLCs
Mhm.
installed. And then if we look at the youth today, that's one hope I see is like the whole maker scene, which I think all parents, encourage your kids to be makers, encourage them, if they're so inclined, encourage them to get involved in Lego League, at least expose it to them so they can know if coding and making machines work is something they want to do. But yeah, so I some of the best PLC guys I know started out as electricians, and I just wanted to throw that
Mhm.
out there because a
Mhm.
maintenance electrician can be a genius programmer. And there are some engineers I know who, when they went to engineering school, they didn't teach them anything about automation, so they're learning from their electricians.
Mhm.
And I just love that, even all the mechanical engineers we have in our industry as well as chemical engineers. I think it's great that no matter what background you're from, you can get into industrial automation, and you can really succeed if you put your mind to it, and you really like this stuff,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so I think that's great. But I'll throw it back to you, Jeremy, because both Gary and I said quite a bit there. So look, go ahead and chime in.
Well, no worries. When I was doing my training for Alan Bradley,
Yep.
um, I often wondered why all we were doing was teaching them how the instruction worked
Mhm,
and the concept of what an instruction was
mhm.
and the different parts of the instruction, with the address and the instruction. And I coined it was Pollard's 3 W's. What is it? Where is it? And what does it do? www dot. And at the end of the day, what I try to impress upon the students is that what you're learning is what the instruction is. You don't know what it's doing because it does so many different things depending upon the application
Yep.
that is involved in it. A timer is a timer is a timer. You know how a timer works. But when it's being hit with an end of travel limit switch on an LVDT or something along those lines, what is that timer doing? Well, it's telling you that if it takes too long for something else to happen, then something has failed.
Yeah, it's
But
key.
a
You got to
timer
teach that
can be
practical part of it.
indeed, and that's what everybody was missing that. And I found that as the training sort of went on, people would bring in copies of the code
Oh yeah,
from their plant and tototally off base. It's like, can you tell me what this does?
yeah,
You
I love
know,
that. I love that.
it's like, and I think training, specifically with IEC, and again, part of the forum, everybody was talking about the standardizing the user interface, which it
Yeah.
has absolutely nothing to do with that.
Although you can
But
see
if
the
you,
influence from Microsoft in that, the Visual Studio, because more and more programming packages, not all of them for sure, but
Mhm,
more and more are starting to look like Visual Studio. More and more,
right,
everybody's starting to look like Visual Studio. So, and
mhm.
now the new look, the new flat, simple look is starting to come in. But go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that the interface that anybody individually has, you'll have tasks, you'll have programs, you'll have routines, you'll have data typing, you'll have a tag database. And another comment that everybody was talking about is standardizing of databases. There's no standardization of
No,
databases anywhere, right?
no,
Everybody's got their own stuff. So at the end of the day, IEC does not address anything that a normal PLC either addresses or doesn't. All it is a different way of being able to implement code for an application. It's the transportability aspect of it, in my mind, is strictly moving from one platform to another. And you know what a program is, you know what a task is, you know what a routine is, you know it has to have a database. Maybe it's got built-in HMI or not, but IEC doesn't lend anything untoward understanding the application any more than code for a PLC does. And I find that the documentation availability in some of the IEC offerings are just lacking. They just haven't given on-screen documentation sort of the best shake.
I thought you were going to say that the IEC standard is too expensive, which I would totally agree with. You know, $700, $800, $900 for a standard.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, IEC is not a for-profit company here. Their bills are paid.
Mm-hmm.
Why they're charging so much to educational institutions or just the average user? But again, I get what you're saying. The documentation actually in the program environment itself is lacking, and
Yeah.
even the documentation on the instructions. One of the things I had a difficult time with a vendor we were talking about earlier is, you know, if I go into Rockwell Siemens, I click on an instruction, hit F1, I get this great description of how that instruction works, right? There are other platforms out there where they're like, well, go check out the website. It's like, oh, really? 3:00 in the morning, the internet's out. Whatever. Yeah. What?
And I'm on a laptop that doesn't connect, you know?
Yeah. I'm in a validated environment where there is no internet connection because that would be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And again, IEC-1131, I think, has taken just about 30 years not to become an overnight success, but to have some level of success. And all of the issues that we talked about in 95, I still think somewhat remain in some of the misconceptions as to what it is. You know, everybody is saying, well, yeah, we can take one piece of program and put it over to another, but you cannot do that. And PLC Open with the XML transfer standard, if you will, is attempting to try to export structured text to XML. And then another vendor will have an XML import, like the PLC Open XML import routine. Well, why would I want to do that? I want my customers to be focused on me, not on, 13 other vendors out there.
But
So,
I think the structured text language came out, when it started coming out, the standard had already existed.
of course.
Tell me if I'm wrong. So
Mhm.
I think that's the one language that's nearly identical in all PLCs.
While I don't disagree, but again, you can add extensions to it. You can create your own instruction set if that's what you choose to do.
Well, your hardware is going to have unique properties because not everybody's I/O is built with the same chips.
Yeah, the operating system in the PLC has to be able to either interpret or compile it, depending upon what the platform is.
Yep.
But again, if something doesn't translate, it just raises a flag and says, well, you're asking me to do a no-op, and I don't have that. So figure it out, or something
Thoughts,
like
Gary?
that. I think sorry, Gary?
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, no, I was interrupted you. Sorry.
I was just going to, my thoughts, I just wanted to give a shout out to Dick Morley and his right-hand man, Chuck, for that software, the Modbus protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Another shout out to a gentleman named the late Dennis Morin and Phil Huber for their interoperability, especially DD and NetDD with Excel spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
And why was that so important? Because in the Triconics class where I would teach the TriStation, guess what? When you started typing your program or making the function blocks, you were actually starting a database on the left-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And that database went directly into Excel. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went out to your plant under the Modbus protocol. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Chuck. And just the way TriStation took advantage of those and just, mapped them. We didn't want to make it a Triconics class. We wanted to make it your customer class and how important that database, this common database which everybody uses, you either start with the database or you work with the database, and it's got to go out somehow. A Modbus protocol is still that dominant out there. So I just think of the folks that came before us, and we we incorporated that, which I think was a smart thing to do in Triconics and the training department. To give shout outs to them, and credit, to use that existing, because our customers, everybody knew what Modbus protocol was. Excel was coming in. Small shout out to Bill Gates. And then, by the way, this IEC came out, and you'll be programming to, at least a standard. And functional block diagram is functional block diagram, maybe not vendor to vendor, but the code is. And it just wrapped together really nicely. And if we as trainers, we know that, we have no reason to, sell or badmouth or anything like that. All these good systems that are working together, you, the customer, are doing something really, really important, like starting up a plant. And by the way, at Triconics, we all had to go out and start up that plant. I remember that my first, how shaky it was. Because if you had that street credibility, and I think all of you have, the customer and walk those fields, then you believed it yourself and you had the credibility in your training program. Maybe that's what we have, that AI and YouTube are not quite there yet, huh? We'll see. But thank you, gentlemen. It's just always been great.
Well, I'd like to think that IEC would have been a lot further on than it is. I believe CodeSys has been successful more because of its marketing and its openness, rather than the technical expertise and prowess that it maybe have. And I'm just opinionated on that.
Well, you left. Go back. You're a consultant now.
I'm gone. But I think everybody's accepted the status quo, and I just don't see it growing and being innovative. I don't understand that. PLC Open started a new working group, and I should have written it down, but I didn't. And it has everything to do with modern day mindsets of automation. I wish I could tell you what it was, but I can't. But they're trying to do something different.
As long as these guys keep these specifications behind a ridiculous paywall of $1,000 for the specification, then they're not going to take off. And this is the old school. This is the old way of doing things. Last time I checked, Microsoft went from proprietary formats to saving Word documents in XML. And that was over a decade ago.
And even PDF,
Yeah, exactly.
Makes
So
it easy.
we're waiting for the old guard, those who chose to focus in on one part of the legacy system, right? And we're waiting for them to retire, so somebody new will come in and say, look, we want IEC-61131-3 to take off. Why are we charging hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the specification which was already paid for?
Yeah.
Which we did not go in. We did not borrow money to create this.
No.
Anybody can open up IEC's books, right? So in any case, I think we need an automation. We're last in everything, right? Well, not everything, but most everything. And so that they will come. And when the standards actually open for people to use and understand and read about, then the vendors will be more like, okay, well, and look what happened with charging cars from different chargers. I mean, that was a ground-based request. People said, well, I want to be able to charge my electric car at anybody's charging station. And so I think that's what's holding it back. But in the meantime, it's okay, because guess what? If you got a brand, if you only have to learn one or two brands, you're going to be in good shape. The people where you work will be able to teach you, or instructors like me, or maybe in the past, instructors like Jeremy or Gary, who taught you how to use that brand. And that's the way it is.
I don't disagree, and I don't want to give anything a bad rap. I believe that anybody in the automation field doing anything will behoove themselves to learn about IEC 1131. Get some of the free stuff that's out there, like CodeAssist 3.5, whatever is free to download, play with it, understand the IEC platform specifics. Maybe you're using Rockwell now and it's sort of IEC, but sort of not. It's tag based, it's data typing and all that stuff, but you don't realize that what it is as far as the IEC 1131 standard or specification is concerned, what is Rockwell doing to be compliant with it? So downloading a copy of CodeSys and playing with it will only serve you well, because at some point, somewhere, some piece of OEM equipment's going to come in and it will have an Altus PLC and it's CodeSys based, and you will have some level of entry into the software and understanding the system better than somebody else who hasn't done that work.
Yeah. And there are a lot of inexpensive PLCs out there that run on CodeSys. Not as inexpensive as I was like. Of course, you can do the Raspberry Pi. You probably pick one up for $50 and then a $50 license from CodeSys. And get some buttons, a breadboard, some buttons, and some LEDs. Make your own little sub 100 trainer. But today, the simple matter of the fact is, and I recently did research into this, you cannot buy a CodeSys PLC as cheaply as you can buy a micro PLC from the major vendors. So I would say, if you have the opportunity, if you're a Siemens house, get an S7-1200 and learn on that. If you're a Rockwell house, even though it's not like Logix, it's $279 or $379. Get a Micro 800 because you get the 3 of the languages in both of those. And even if you learn the Rockwell flavor or the Siemens flavor, you're going to be way ahead. And by all means, if you do find a CodeSys micro PLC under $400, pick it up and try that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would like to say to people, learn the languages. Don't always just stay in ladder logic. Learn structured text, learn function block, and know all 3, at least those 3, because it's going to give you a power. And look, when I went to Siemens from Rockwell, when I started using Siemens, that F1 help on their instructions, that got me through there. And it was so well documented. So I'll say vice versa. If you're Siemens, you're going to use Rockwell, the help inside the system will get you through anything you need to know. And again, if you're using CodeSys, more power to you, but learn. That's what I would say. Gary, final thoughts?
I already gave my shout outs. It's just amazing how and what amazing opportunities there are. And Shawn, you might want a couple guest speakers sometime on your training. I'm sure I could speak for Jeremy, no charge. In one of your training classes, no, bring on the old guard to tell you what's. Maybe that's what these videos are for. And no final thoughts. Just thanks to both of you, and I look forward to our next meeting.
Indeed, thanks to you, Gary, for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And Jeremy, final thoughts. You are just a wealth of information. Any final thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
The new connected component workshop software. Factory Talk. What I can't, again, it's my memory. I can't remember what it's called, but it's closer to RS Logix 5000. But the Micro 800 was the closest to the IEC-61131 specification than Compact Logix was. So and again, for a couple of $100, you pull something together. TW Controls, Tim Wilborn, he builds trainers. I have no idea what cost they are, but I know that he's got a Micro 800 one. Might be worth the investment. And if you don't want to do it on your own, get your boss to buy one so you can play with it just to get a little bit more in depth and round out your education a little better. But I think we can all agree that we all have to advocate for ourselves
Yes.
And if we don't advocate for ourselves, then we will be left behind. And then we'll be struggling because as AI continues to make its mark, certain things are going to become a little bit more complex. I would think so. The better foundation you have, I think, the better off you'll be able to weather the storm that's coming in the next 5 to 10 years.
And Gary, I'd love to get you to that. What Jeremy just said is so important. Could you comment on that? Because you're kind of working with people in the business side of things. Could you throw in your 2 cents on that?
Give me the topic again.
Oh, that
Advocacy.
advocating for yourself and preparing for the future.
Mm-hmm.
For customers, companies, or training businesses.
For individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's so much out there. I think I talked this morning about. I think I'll check with AI to see what they say, and then I'm going to talk to my students,
Mhm.
i.e., customers. And it's an education. It really is. So do take one of each. Do go on YouTube, and talk to someone experienced. And because it's competitive to a college student these days. You have a lot of competition for your dollar, your time, and your money. What's going to work for you? What's the outcome? A lot of things can be said for, I have this piece of paper from this training course. That's a lot of credibility. I have this degree, but I've also, have a lot of experience. It's that age-old question. So right now there's a huge menu out there. And to me, I'm a little biased. I always say, I want that piece of paper. I want that certificate. I want that training course I graduated, because it does show employers or your customers that, yes, you've put in the time and you've completed something. What are companies looking for nowadays? They're looking for problem solvers, and they're looking for personalities. They're looking for, your
Soft skills and thinking.
Soft skills and critical thinking. And I'm just a true believer. So
Mm-hmm.
I gave you, as I tend to do, give you a long answer to a short question. But that's what a true believer says.
And
How a true believer speaks.
I think that's all true. Even if you are a Gen X in your 50s, late 40s, early 60s, I think advocating for yourself, continuously sharpening the saw, as they would say in the 7 Habits, and then trying new things, right? And just helping out the young people, because maybe you only got 10 years left or 15 years left, helping in that younger generation get excited and learn the technologies that's so close to my heart. Even though I'm teaching people in plants, getting those youngsters, because I have grandkids, getting them up to speed and learning if they like doing that kind of stuff, like programming, making, controlling. So Jeremy, it looked like you were going to throw something in there too.
I was going to ask, when your students complete your courses, do they get a certificate of completion?
Me?
Yeah.
They not only get a certificate of completion, they also get professional development hours.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, and those can be converted into CEUs in most states.
Yeah.
The reason we don't do the accreditation is because they don't actually accredit the course. They accredit the it's like almost an ISO thing. They accredit your company that you have processes in place. Well, I think that's kind of bogus. I want the courses to be accredited. I don't care about if my company has paper flow. And so it's kind of, it's like they want 15 grand. Anyways, I'm going way off topic. I'll cut this out. And it's like, that's ridiculous. So I'm self-employed. I'm not going to spend 15 grand for you to check my paperwork. But in any case, I'll cut that out. But yeah, I think that's very important that they can show, and I give them lifetime access. So it's like an ebook or a audiobook. When they buy my course, they don't, like, I do Q&A every day. So they it's because I think you both know, if you don't touch something for a few years and you go back to it, it's kind of like, how do I do this again?
Yeah. And one of the problems we always had with training is that I go back to the plant, it's so reliable, I don't see it for 6 months.
Absolutely.
And that's today, if you've got augmented reality, if you've got access on your phone to a server somewhere with some training highlights, like how to configure RS links for DH485, I know.
I'm your man.
I understand that. I had to create an actual. I tried to log into the API of RS Logics and RS Links, so that I created a VB app, and this is what you want, and it would show you how to configure it.
That's awesome.
But because you had to, I mean, again, these guys, what's DH485? But that's what the driver is named.
Yep.
So you got to be able to understand what it is to select the right driver. You know, it's not like communication from computer to SLC 502. You know,
Oh, that's why when I do the lifetime access, because I go through each one of the drivers, and then,
Mhm.
unless they want to come back and do it when when they're ready to do it. I've had a number of people tell me, yeah, I come back whenever I have to do something different, because how am I supposed to remember that 5 years ago?
Without a doubt. And if you do it all the time, but again, they're so reliable.
Yeah.
And
they don't-
typically the maintenance guy is not changing code.
Yep.
All he's doing is looking at code based upon downtime.
Yep.
And how often does that really happen?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So again,
And it's just too much stress when it does happen to try to use it as a learning experience.
at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's always a problem.
Well, guys, I
And I
want to
will
thank.
always advocate for those people.
Oh,
Always.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Always.
Gentlemen, it's been another eye-opening episode of the History of Automation podcast. I want to thank Jeremy and Gary. Just hearing your stories about your initial interactions with this new standard back in the 90s, 1131 back then.
Mhm.
Really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing your thoughts and opinions and history with us.
I don't know, Gary.
Happy
Is it our
holidays.
pleasure?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No, it's wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity, Shawn. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, same. Thank you,